Admiral Krextar of the Hegemony's Third Conquest Fleet stood before the Council of Supremacy, his once pristine uniform bearing scorch marks, and his four eyes unable to meet the gaze of the supreme overlords. The debriefing chamber, carved from crystalline formations that had witnessed 1,000 victory celebrations, now felt like a tomb. "Explain," commanded Overlord Vashti, her voice cutting through the chamber's oppressive silence like a plasma blade through flesh. "You departed with 9,900 vessels of the line, the greatest armada in Hegemony history. You return with 17 damaged ships and tales of defeat." Krextar's mandibles clicked nervously. In 40 cycles of conquest, he had never failed to deliver a planet to the Hegemony's ever-expanding empire. Lesser species crumbled before their technological superiority. Worlds surrendered at the mere sight of their dreadnoughts emerging from hyperspace. Earth should have been no different. "The intelligence was flawed, Supreme Overlord," Krextar began, his voice hoarse from the recycled air of emergency life support systems. "We believe humanity to be a primitive species. Single-planet civilization. No significant military space presence. And yet, another overlord interjected, you lost 99.8% of our fleet to these primitives?" The Admiral's primary eyes finally lifted. "They weren't primitives, Supreme Overlord. That was our first mistake." The holographic display activated, showing Earth as it appeared when the Hegemony fleet first dropped out of hyperspace. A blue-green marble, seemingly peaceful, with only a handful of orbital stations and primitive chemical propulsion craft visible. "We followed standard conquest protocol," Krextar continued. "Orbital bombardment to eliminate military installations, followed by ground occupation forces. The initial strikes were successful. Their International Space Station was destroyed. Their primitive satellite network was eliminated. Then what went wrong?" Vashti demanded. Krextar's combat clause retracted involuntarily, a sign of species' deep trauma. "The humans, they didn't surrender. Standard doctrine assumes rational beings will capitulate when faced with overwhelming force. Humans are not rational." The holographic display shifted to show the Battle of Luna, humanity's first major space engagement. Small, crude vessels, barely more than chemical rockets with weapons strapped to them, swarmed the Hegemony's mighty dreadnoughts like angry insects. "They weaponized everything," the Admiral whispered. "Cargo haulers became suicide bombers. Civilian transports filled with explosives. They turned their own space debris into kinetic weapons. When we destroyed their ships, the wreckage became weapons platforms." The display showed impossible scenes. Human pilots ramming fighters into capital ships 10,000 times their mass, nuclear weapons jury-rigged into improvised torpedoes, even humans in primitive spacesuits floating through debris fields with magnetic mines. "But surely they're ground forces," another overlord began. "There were no front lines," Krextar interrupted, his voice cracking. "Every human was a combatant. They're young, they're old, they're infirm, all fought with whatever they could find. They turned their cities into mazes of death. Every building became a fortress, every street a kill zone." The footage shifted to the disastrous New York landing. What should have been a simple occupation became a months-long siege. Humans fought from subway tunnels, skyscrapers, and sewers. They used improvised explosives, chemical weapons, and tactics that violated every civilized convention of warfare. They had no central command to destroy, Krextar continued, his mandibles trembling. No single government to negotiate with. When we eliminated their leaders, others took their place. When we destroyed their military, civilians picked up weapons. When we bombed their cities, they fought from the rubble. The final images were the most disturbing. Human guerrilla fighters emerging from the ruins of bombed hospitals to attack supply convoys, using their own medical facilities as bait. And then, the Admiral paused, his voice barely audible. They learned. Learned what? Vashti demanded. How to fight us. How to board our ships. How to turn our own technology against us. The display showed the unthinkable. Human soldiers, wearing stolen hegemony armor, operating captured plasma cannons, flying commandeered fighter craft with suicidal efficiency. In the end, we weren't fighting an army. We were fighting an entire species that refused to accept defeat. Every victory cost us 10 times what it should have. Every mile of ground required 1,000 dead. And when winter came to their northern hemisphere, Krekstar's voice failed entirely. The horrors of the Siberian campaign were beyond description. Humans fighting in temperatures that killed hegemony troops even through environmental suits, using the cold itself as a weapon. They started calling it Terran fever. He finally managed. Our troops began refusing orders. Desertion rates reached 60%. The sight of those blue skies became synonymous with death. The chamber fell silent. The hegemony had conquered 847 worlds. Never had they faced a species that simply refused to be conquered. Recommendation? Overlord Vashti asked coldly. Admiral Krekstar straightened, meeting her gaze for the first time since his return. Quarantine the Sol system. Post warning beacons. Never return. And if they develop interstellar travel? The Admiral's response chilled every being in the chamber. Then we surrender first.